Can you guys hear me? Yeah? All right, good. So, if you guys like fancy pants, clap your hands. That's right. If you like the oceans, clap your hands louder. So today, I'm going to start with the way I started with the last talk, which requires everybody to be quiet and still and seated in a bit of a meditative moment. But I want everybody here to just take one long, deep breath. It's nice, right? Take one more. Okay, so that second breath, and probably a good portion of the first breath, you can thank the oceans for. I've said this many times, but the oceans are responsible for a large portion of our climate. They're responsible for most of the oxygen that we breathe. They are a very, very, very important part of our lives. So whether we decide to study or invest in them or not, either way, they are an integral part of your survival and a lot of the things living around you. Today, I'm going to be speaking on behalf of a group I work with called the Schmidt Marine Technology Partners. We're based out of San Francisco. They're part of the Schmidt Family Foundation. And we fund things within this spectrum of trying to understand how we can best bridge the gap for marine technology between startups, things that are sort of sequestered within academia, onto commercialization and industry. And there was this great quote that was given to us by one of our grantees that I really liked. It was the reason we are doing this not because one has been solved this problem. It's solved 100 times, but it all ended up on a shelf. No one did the next steps to push it out and make it available. This is Dr. Alan Adams from MIT. He's spoken at many TED Talks. He's actually a physicist, and we'll chat about him in a bit. The reason we went into this space is because we realized that there was somehow a gap for ocean tech funding. And we wondered from our end, as a philanthropic entity, how we could address this gap. So Schmidt Family Foundation, it has a philanthropy component, it has a venture capital component, and then we also have this, how can we fill in within the ocean science and technology, and this is where Schmidt Marine evolved. So we have a standard mission here. This mission is to enable the development of marine technologies with the promise of conservation and research applications through funding and business support. That's our basic, big tagline, what we want to accomplish. But there's an underlying actual mission statement, too, which I've heard over and over here at Catapult, and we were just talking about it up on stage here, which I think is the really unifying statement, is this idea of community and collaboration. And it's to create these opportunities for better communication and coordination within the marine technology field to help build connections and new resources outside of the field. This is why I love talking to groups like this, because most of you probably don't have some sort of background in this sector. I myself am very entrenched in it. I came through marine science, marine technology, operations, funding, outreach. But what I love to see is new applications, new industries that can very much dovetail into the oceanographic sector. So what we found here is that there's this valley, this trench of death, as you guys talk about it, right? You guys call it the valley of death. We call it the trench of death because we're talking about the ocean, where you have an idea, and as you're trying to come across this and get funding, you need a lot of help. And it's not just money. It's support with IT, it's understanding how to do an IPO, how to do all these different ideas, business development, till you can finally get to the stage where actually you might get some venture capitalists to be interested in you to fund your big idea to some point of large commercialization. So we come in at this intersection in between, and I think this is a really, really important area, especially when you're talking about technologies in the ocean that are related to conservation. So we provide not just the first initial grant funding, but then we also provide various business services through, who here has heard of NASA's TRL, Technology Readiness Level? So it's a very American thing. It's basically a scale 1 to 10. 1, it's just a basic idea. 10, you're in full-fledged development. We like to fund ideas that are somewhere around a 2 or 3 to 5, which means that they're a little beyond just something I've been thinking in my head, but they're starting to get developed enough that we know that we can start to apply different metrics and technologies to them. fund them to the level of about a 7, which is when they're ready for some level of commercialization and development, and then they can go on to this point here where it says access to investment. Because it is a foundation, we've decided to focus on a few different areas. I am happy to talk about various other areas of investment in the ocean sector because we are a foundation and because we have certain missions. We've decided not to focus on oil and gas. We've decided not to focus on aquaculture or energy sector. But some of my colleagues out here that are going to speak later, I think, will enlighten you guys a lot on that particular element. So we've looked at enabling ocean research, sustainable fisheries, habitat health, plastic pollution, and what I alluded to earlier, which is connecting the community. So that first quote I showed you was from Alan Adams. He's a professor at MIT. And he came up with this really cool idea for these ultra-low-cost sensors in the ocean that enable communication. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on these because I just don't have a lot of time, but the idea is that he's at MIT, he's at Woods Hole. We gave him a very tiny amount of funding to basically now enable many, many sensors across ocean platforms to communicate. So this can actually interact with several different other grantees that we have. Another exciting one is within sustainable fisheries. This group, Pelagic Data Systems, has done something where they've created a small unit that can go on something as tiny as a canoe out in Indonesia. It can track the movements of that fishing vessel. It can also look at the temperature of the well in which the fish are put into. And it creates a small artisanal fisheries where when you bring that fish back to shore, now the community there knows everything of where that boat's been, how long that fish has been in the hole, and it enables the communal, local resource of sharing and selling that resource, which is tremendous for a lot of these developing island nations. And finally, there's also habitat health. And this is probably my favorite. You'll see Dave Vaughn. He's on your left-hand side, the older fellow. This was his second start of his career. He's in Florida, Mote Marine Laboratory. In his 70s, he realized he had been working with coral for his whole life. And he realized as he broke it apart by accident, it started to regenerate much quicker. And as he worked further and further along with this technique, he realized that this was a way he could learn and work with different coral species to actually regenerate entire coral reefs much, much quicker than traditional methods. So he's been using this in Florida. He's found ways to do this globally. And now, through our funding, he's finding a way to create this into packages that he can ship to other island nations, train them, and then they can do it with coral species relevant to their shoreline. So this is really important when we're talking about climate change, rising sea surface temperatures, decline in coral reefs. Something that's a low-cost technology like this is equally as important to us as some high-tech GPS type of unit. Oops, and I also just wanted to say that he was highlighted in the New York Times, and the AARP, which is the American Association of Retired People, did a whole program on him. He's like their poster child for retirement because he's kicking ass at 70 doing this whole new thing. And the final area is plastics pollution. I highlighted a sensor here that actually looks at plastic through a sensor that they created, low-tech, high rewards Raman spectrometry, which can look at fine particles of plastic and determine where they are in the water column, if they want to collect them or not. But by and large, a lot of the stuff that we look at and fund within the plastic pollution sector is actually onshore. So it is an upstream problem. This is one of the things we focus on, but at times we also look at it in downstream within the source because it's also important to understand how it's cycling through the system, areas to focus on, and also for legislation to make change. And then the last thing is what I alluded to, which was connections. We do a lot of different workshops, various things. We bring people in. But I'd actually like to end with a story that I had here in Norway when I got in last night. My hotel had been canceled. I had to book into another location. And when I was there, the woman who was booking me in late at night said, "Oh, what are you here for? What do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm an oceanographer. I'm here to give a talk for this thing called Catapult Fest." She said, "That's amazing. I just read an article about a woman who's trying to do stuff for plastics pollution out of the United States. I want to say maybe she's with the Gates Foundation, and I said, oh, was it Wendy Schmidt? She said, yes, that's it, Wendy Schmidt. I said, well, that's who I work for, and this is the talk I'm going to give today, is this woman who's funded a variety of things, including looking at plastic pollution solutions in the ocean. So I thought this was so cool that here's this woman in Oslo checking me into my hotel at 10 at night, another woman talking about a woman that she had read an article about who's trying to combat plastics in the ocean. And it was just a really unique and exciting moment outside of Catapult that I think that I will get a chance to go back and tell my colleagues about that was as valuable as the conversations I hope to have with you guys here. So I will reserve my questions for after because I think we're running out of time for the next speaker, who is